Welcome to the Pursuit of Glory. This is a real-life, real-time documentary about a 15-year-old Korean-Australian boy with the dream to become a world boxing champion. Let us see if he can make it to the championship of the world. The Pursuit of Glory, Episode 5, Boxing Conditioning. Whatever the fighting art one pursues, there are certain exercises that are specific to that art. Each martial art has different aspects they specialize in. Hence, today we'll be addressing some exercises that are related to boxing. The first drill we're practicing is bouncing on his toes using an old truck tire. Relatively flexible truck tire will work his calves more as there is less resistance than the concrete floor. The boy was very surprised at how much his lower legs were burning from the exercise just after a short time. I instructed him to practice bouncing on his toes whilst focusing on his breath. I informed that for any endurance-based activity such as long-distance running, boxing, one must be able to constantly feed their body fuel, which in these instances the fuel would be oxygen. The personal journey the boy has to go through is he has to find a way to find his own breathing pattern. But rather than let him travel blind and find out the hard way, I gave him some simple instructions to focus on the out breath, as once a fighter breathes out, they have no other choice but to breathe in. But moreover, it will happen naturally. This takes TNP, time and practice, but once mastered, the breathing cycle will be continuous, just like infinity symbol. I've explained that it is relatively easy to find your breathing pattern when you are doing a repetitive exercise such as running or skipping, but in a fight the breathing is not repetitive, and hence without a proper breathing strategy the fighter will hyperventilate and, as they say commonly, gas out. We'll be addressing the specific breathing techniques for fighting in a future episode, but he has to start with the basics. As with any fighting art, you have to learn the basic techniques before you can learn the advanced techniques. Every martial artist, whatever the art, needs to condition every part of their body, as martial arts requires all one's mind, body and spirit when performing in real battle. Each martial art has special training techniques and drills to condition key areas needed to specialize in that art. And there are very important reasons for these drills. So, for Thai boxing, they condition their shins and kick the banana tree for obvious reasons, as the roundhouse kick in Muay Thai is one of the best weapons, and hence the shin must be able to go through anything, even another person's shin. In judo, they do extra training for grip strength, as grip fighting is a critical part of judo. In sumo, you need strong base to remain grounded, and hence they spend hours daily drilling shiko, which is for their leg balance and strength. Believe it or not, but a sumo wrestler, who are huge monster-like human beings, can balance on one leg whilst holding their other leg up, so they are effectively doing the splits whilst balancing on one leg. Now come on, if that is not unbelievable, what is? Jordan is now doing tire flips, which is a compound exercise which will increase his ballistic power. Sledgehammer strikes. So the other drill that boxers famously do is chop wood. I don't have wood to chop, so another way to emulate the benefits of this drill is sledgehammer strikes. Striking the tire with the sledgehammer practices transferring the power generated from the lower body through the core and out of the end of the boxer's fist. Striking the tire works the cardio and helps produce that ballistic power a boxer needs, as their punches should be catapulted out without tell. So the power is generated internally using the earth and then transferred through the core and out to the end of the fist, in which the maximum force is produced right at the end of the punch, similar to when the hammer strikes the tire. Moreover, when the hammer strikes the tire, the boxer needs to exhale to emphasize the force at the end of the punch. And exhaling is the key to a boxer's breathing, as when you exhale, the only thing you can do straight after is inhale. One must ponder on this deeply. Furthermore, one must practice this diligently. So like the boy does grip training for judo, the boy needs to practice hitting the tire to work his core strength and ballistic power, as the fundamental major movement for a punch is the twisting of the hips and ballistic power of the breath and core. Boxing is more like a marathon as opposed to a sprint. So the purpose of the 2-minute rounds will also train his breathing. A boxer effectively has to have the endurance of a marathon runner, but also have the ballistic power of a sprinter, as when they exchange, it happens in bursts and not just at a constant predictable speed. This is why boxing is such a challenge, as you have to find the perfect mix of having strong ballistic power like a sprinter and then also have the endurance of a marathon runner. This balance takes practice to master. It is only early days, so we are easing into the types of exercises he will have to endure as a professional boxer. I instructed to practice his breathing for each rep and keep it continuous with bursts of power, which is effectively what boxing is like. It is like jogging with short spurts of sprints in between. So a boxer has to know how to go from 30 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour and back down to 30 miles an hour and up to 80, 90 miles an hour and so on and so forth. They have to be able to continue to work in that broken pattern. It is not like a long distance run where you are traveling at a constant speed and hence you can have a repetitive breathing pattern. This is why I told the boy that a boxer needs to be explosive like a sprinter, but also have the endurance of a long distance runner. This is a fine art and hence takes a lot of practice. Mountain climbers is another great multifunctional exercise that works the core, but in addition works the cardiovascular system. All fighters need to do a lot of core work, especially boxers. A good strong core protects the internal organs behind your abs from getting damaged. A good strong core connects the upper body and the lower body so that the power generated from the ground can be transferred up through to the upper body and out of the end of the fist. A good strong core also adds to the energy generated from the lower half with its twisting motion, which produces torque power to transfer the accumulated power out the end of the boxer's fist. A good strong core ultimately brings the separate parts of the lower body and upper body to form one unified strong body. So boxers are famous for working their core muscles, and hence the presentation of their core muscles at the boxer's weigh-in is a big indication of whether the boxer has put in the hard work or not. But in saying that, never let looks deceive you, like Nate Diaz deceived Conor McGregor, where McGregor took Nate Diaz too lightly as he didn't have the usual six-pack and ripped muscles. Nate's muscles may look not impressive, like bodybuilders, but his muscles are 100% functional, as his strength lies in his physical structure as a whole. That is, his strength lies in his combination of bones, ligaments and muscles, not just the most external muscles that can be seen. As the boy's muscles started to burn and lactic acid started to build up, I instructed to maintain his structure, but focus on relaxing the muscles and breathing so the oxygen in the blood can flow continuously to the key areas where lactic acid is building. This can only be understood by the person who practices it, as it is something that can only be interpreted through your nervous system. And as the famous Bruce Lee said, you must feel. So boxers are famous for working their core muscles, and hence the presentation of their core muscles at the boxer's weigh-in is always a big indication of whether the boxer has put in the hard work or not. But in saying that, never let looks deceive you, as when Nate Diaz in their first meeting deceived Conor McGregor, where McGregor took Nate Diaz too lightly as he didn't have the usual six-packed and ripped muscles. Nate's muscles may not look impressive like bodybuilders, but his muscles are 100% functional, as his strength lies in his physical structure as a whole. That is, his strength lies in the combination of his bones, ligaments and muscles, not just the most external muscles that people can see. As the boy's muscles started to burn and lactic acid started to build up, I instructed to maintain his structure, but focus on relaxing the muscles and breathing so that the oxygen can flow freely and continuously to the key areas where lactic acid is building. This can only be understood by the person who practices it, as it is something that can only be interpreted through the nervous system. As the infamous Bruce Lee said, you must feel. Sit-ups are one of the most famous, or if not the most famous exercise to build strong abs and core. This infamous exercise works those key abdominal muscles which protect the internal organs laying behind, predominantly the stomach and intestines. And as most people would know, if you take a punch to the stomach region, the body's reaction is to want to throw up due to the trauma. However, it is not just the abdominal muscles that get worked, but as with any endurance activity, one must learn to breathe and fuel the cardiovascular system, which ultimately then fuels the muscles. So, I instructed him to practice continuous breathing pattern to provide consistent fuel, whilst keeping his abs contracted. This takes a lot of practice. I've gone through it and had to learn the long and hard way to efficient breathing. But to expedite the process, I have relayed my findings and am trying to transfer the experience to him so he may progress more efficiently. So I've once again instructed to focus on the out breath, as when you focus on the out breath, the only natural thing you can do is breathe in, and that will keep the continuous breathing pattern, as it takes far less mental energy to focus on just the out breath, as opposed to thinking about both the in-breath and the out-breath, as most untrained and inexperienced boxers would do. I instructed to visualize his in and out breath traveling in the path of an infinity symbol where there is no end, and is continuous forever. So one must P and P, practice and ponder, to understand and master this. Medicine ball throws. Medicine ball throws is a great full body and functional exercise that builds ballistic power, builds functional strength in the lifting stage, but moreover builds explosive power and strength when slamming the ball to Mother Earth as hard as you can. I instructed the boy to try and visualize throwing the medicine ball 50 meters into the ground whilst exhaling powerfully to add extra explosive force as the end. Just like the maximum power of a punch is at the end of its trajectory. So this drill is beneficial for many reasons. So one must focus on the numerous functions, individually and collectively. And once again, it works the cardiovascular system. As we are working on doing it for 2 minutes to emulate the amateur boxing round prior to 2009, where an amateur boxing round was 4 by 2 minute rounds. But now it is changed to 3 by 3 minute rounds. So we will increase the duration to 3 minutes in due time. But in the initial stage, 2 minute rounds will be sufficient. But either way, this takes diligent practice. Forearm conditioning. One of the most common and one of the oldest tips in boxing is to keep your hands up. Well, under the hands are the forearms, which I've told the boy is the pillar of your defense. Just by having your hands up, your forearms and fists produce a natural defensive wall that your opponents have to go through in order to hit you. By creating that defensive wall, the opponent has to think of a way to break through that wall, go around it, or open it up to get through to the targets. But just by having your hands down, you give your opponent a myriad of ways to get to the targets without any resistance. But at the same time, you will need to assess the opponent's skills, as it could be part of their style to set traps. Either way, boxing with your hands down is an advanced level technique only the experienced can use. If a beginner were to learn how to fight with their hands down, they will surely have a short career in boxing. Muhammad Ali, the greatest, when competing in his more mature years, had to change his style, as he didn't have the athletic ability of his youth anymore and was not able to float around like a butterfly as much. So, even the greatest went back to the basics of putting his hands up to cover his targets to defend against the extremely heavy artillery coming from him in the likes of Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Ernie Shavers, and more. Hence, the forearms need to be conditioned to defend the fort. The drill doesn't just condition the forearms to take and defend punches, but moreover, it strengthens the whole physical structure to take the impact of the punch, as a strong wall is going to stop a lot more artillery than weak wall. One must ponder on this deeply. The boy is handling the drill surprisingly well and held a good poker face during the drill. And every boxer needs to know how to hide pain if they ever feel it. Fist conditioning. In boxing, the fists are the weapons that do the damage, so they need to be conditioned into iron or stone-like, whichever you prefer. But either way, you want to have strong, durable fists. Imagine hitting someone with an empty glove. Won't do much damage, but put a solid stone or an iron-like fist in there, and then you have a weapon. So, you need to forge strong iron-like fists. In karate, they hit the famous makiwara board. This board is used as a key tool to condition not just the fist itself, but rather the whole mechanical chain that takes the force of the punch. That is, it will condition the fist, which is joined to the forearm by the wrist, and the rest of the body, which will condition the structure that exerts and absorbs the shock of the punch, hence giving you overall a more powerful punch. One must practice this diligently. Then, as each microfracture that forms in the fist heals, and the process is repeated, then session by session, and step by step, the bones, ligaments and tendons in the fist will become thicker and stronger to finally forge a formidable weapon. We do not yet have a makiwara board, but we'll have to formulate one in due time. But in the meantime, we'll be using sand in a box, as we must adapt to the situation and use what we have. Neck bridge, front and back. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. One must ponder on this deeply. The only thing that connects the human head to the body is the neck. For instance, wrestlers do lots and lots of neck strengthening exercises, as wrestlers get thrown in every direction and hence have to have extremely strong necks, so that if they ever land on their head, they don't break their neck. And I've read many stories where neck strengthening exercises have saved the necks of many fighters, including myself. I personally got thrown directly onto my head in judo randori by a young buck. I landed directly on my head with my full body weight behind it and hit the mat like a spear. My neck froze up for a good 20-30 minutes and was stiff for a couple days. But if I didn't do a lot of wrestling style neck drills, neck bridges and so on when I was boxing, I believe the trauma would have broken my neck. But luckily, I, like many other wrestlers, did not suffer a broken neck due to all the hundreds and thousands of neck bridges and drills that I did. I was inspired by Mike Tyson to do these, and I'm so glad I did. Hence, it is critical for a boxer to have a strong neck, as it will help the boxer absorb the power of the punch much better. Every boxer must prepare for this, as every boxer will, at one time or another, get punched in the face. The greatest fighters of all time have all been able to take a punch, as if they couldn't take a punch, they would not ever have got to where they were. Of course, the aim of the game is to not get hit, but you cannot dodge every single punch that comes your way. So even the greatest fighters all get tested sooner or later. Roy Jones Jr. got tested by Antonio Tarver. Tyson Fury got tested by Wilder. Gamboa got tested by Crawford. Alvarez got tested by Triple G Golovkin. Some stand up to the test, some fail the test. But all get tested. The greatest, Muhammad Ali, was so great, he was too great in taking punches. He also was definitely one of the most resilient boxers of all time. The amount of punishment he could take was jaw-dropping, to the point that it was not good for his health, as it would have been less damaging to just get knocked out and not take all those extra punches that would literally kill a normal human being. But if they were to take such punishment, bottom line is, if you ever want to hear the bell at the end of the 12th round, you'll need to be able to take a punch. So the neck should be an extension of the skull, and they should be fused into one solid piece instead of being treated like a separate independent joint, just like the Pachycephalosaurus. One must ponder on this deeply.